The wave of detransitioners happening right now is actually insane.
I was a teenager. I
transitioned. Now I look the way I do, but I'm not trans.
Detransition is like leaving a cult.
I have lost pretty much every single one of my friends from when I lived as transgender since I detransitioned.
I lived as a trans woman from ages 19 to 26, and I recently detransitioned about 6 months ago.
Losing the ability to give vaginal birth.
If you told me at 17, if you sat there and told me every single issue, every single surgery that I would have because of a stupid injection that doesn't even work because I cannot become a man, I would have said no. I would have said no, and I would have had a different life.
It's the gaslighting for me. You know, it's this constant barrage of things that I am being reassured are not happening, are not going to happen, that just keep happening. The wave of detransitioners happening right now is actually insane. It's something that I knew would happen because I've been warning about it for the past decade, but it's in larger numbers and quicker than even I thought. Most of these coming from, as we've discussed before, 2020 transitioners. There's a huge trend on TikTok. Why is everyone detransitioning from 2020? And so we talked about how the trend overall of trans is going down, but we haven't spoken about this horrific fallout. You know, it's not just a trend dying, it's people whose bodies have been, I don't like to say ruined because I do not like to speak that on people that I see as victims. It's very sad, but irreparably harmed in some ways. And there's an actual human component to this.
I was a teenager. I was injecting testosterone for 3 years. Last year I found a cyst on my thigh. I had a dream that God told me that I would be losing both of my legs. Not literally. And then that's when I found it. And it was my injection site. And it makes me so angry that even when you stop testosterone, even when you stop this, there's no going back. You're gonna be dealing with health issues for the rest of your life. I woke up sobbing and wailing. I want to go through another surgery. I don't want to do this again. And I shouldn't have to. If you told me at 17, if you sat there and told me every single issue, every single surgery that I would have because of a stupid injection that doesn't even work because I cannot become a man, I would have said no. I would have said no, and I would have had a different life. But you robbed me of that choice. You lied to me. You told me that I would die, that I would off myself. You threatened my family. Like my mom just keeps saying, I would tell you not to take it. But what the fuck are you supposed to do in that situation? When you're threatening me as a child to take me out of my home, that I would be separated from my parents. That if I didn't take this one day, one magical day, I would want to off myself.
This girl's name is Princess Jade, by the way, on social media. She is super sweet. She makes a lot of really informative content on this. You guys should go follow her. Yes, there is no going back when you transition. I think sometimes even the word detransition, even though obviously it's something we have to talk about, the word itself is actually kind of inaccurate because there is no real way medically to completely undo everything. So if you're like me and find yourself thinking, I would love to make some extra money right now, but refuse to actually work for it, then listen up because this is genuinely amazing. This is about today's sponsor, Free Cash, which you guys have been loving so much lately. And I am so happy about that because it's way more legit than I ever would have expected. It's awesome. Free Cash is a site where you can make real money just by playing mobile games. That's literally it. Sign up, get offers, complete them, cash out. And before anyone tries it, like I said, yes, they are legit. They have a 4.8 star rating on Trustpilot with over 250,000 reviews. I'll put the screenshot here so that you can see it. This is the interface on my phone. Super clean, super simple, makes sense. I picked Word Collect because the payout is good and it's actually really fun. And this is important when you start an offer, make sure you enable app tracking because because that's how free cash verifies your progress and pays you the correct amount. Here's me playing it, and here's my offer progress on free cash. Look how much I've already made, and I did this while watching TV. That's it. I even made a couple of small in-app purchases to speed things up, and free cash actually gave me cash back for that. You can see the bonus rewards right here. Now I'm gonna cash out so you can see how it actually works. Going to the cash out section, selecting PayPal, and done. And here's the screenshot. It just hit my PayPal account. If you wanna try free cash, make sure you click the link in the description or scan the QR code somewhere on the screen. And when you use my link, you'll get a $5 bonus on the first offer that you start. And look at the screen. I have listed the countries where the bonus is available. So check that to make sure that you're eligible. And before you go, I kept playing my game and I actually made more progress. So scan the QR code or click the link before you forget. Thank you so much to Free Cash for sponsoring this video, and now on to the rest of the video. When it comes to hormones, and especially taken when you're young like this as a kid, it alters your development permanently in the long run, even if you stop it. That is not something clearly that is told to these kids. And something else that is really not talked about, and as you're gonna see, most of the videos we're reacting to today are female to male detransitioners, so women who try to become men. The way that testosterone will wreak havoc on a female body is just so different than a male taking estrogen. It's not that there's not pitfalls to that. It's not that I have even personally had to sort of counterbalance certain things that I might be more predisposed to, health issues, and work my best to be healthy. But when it comes to females taking testosterone and the, schedule of treatments for trans men, it ravages their body and their health in a way that is so different. And so the fact that it's treated such the same as male to female is also a really big problem. It's not a coincidence that most of these detrans people that I see are born female. And it really is like an emotional heist. It's like abuse. I've always spoken against this MO that medical professionals have to say that you either transition or you delete yourself. You transition or you're going to want to end your own life. That is the craziest thing to me, because first of all, speaking those words over somebody, cursing somebody like that, telling them their future, even if it's a possibility. When you're young and you have your life ahead of you, there should be no world in which that's even brought in as a possibility to your mindset. And yet, if it's not there, the doctors plant it in these trans kids. The doctors plant it in the parents of these trans kids. And so, just like she stated, a lot of these mothers do have every good intention, or they're scared into it. They're blackmailed into it. And I want to put this Gremlins video in next, because it shows what detransitioners have to put up with. This trans person is responding to Princess Jade, whose video we just played. This is what they put up with.
I've discovered something, a fun little trend I've noticed regarding people who detransition, because apparently it took away their childhood and their innocence. So let's play a game real quick. What do all of these people have in common? 1, they're all detransitioners. 2, they're all AFAB, which means they were all transitioning to be men. And 3, they're all white. Why do all of the most prominent detransition grifters fall into those 3 categories? If detransitioning was such an epidemic, wouldn't there be a mix of both trans femme and trans masc detransitioners using their detransition to grift to the right wing? The reason these ones are the most prominent is because they're the most politically useful.
Or maybe you're just stupid. Maybe you're extremely unintelligent, and that's why you can't figure out how to wash your hair. First of all, the fact that you can only look through this through one prism, shouldn't the detransitioners be a mix of different people? Well, maybe there's different problems involved. Maybe it's not as black and white as you're seeing it. Maybe it's not gonna look the way it's supposed to look in your own perspective, your own very limited, foolish perspective. The first thing is, how is it a grift to fall prey to medical malpractice and then talk about it publicly? How is that a grift? Even if they make money from it. Like the word grift, it's one of the most overused words of this time. I hate this word, not only because I get it thrown at me, for having whatever, but also this is why I don't let it affect me, because if you can launch it at somebody who's been a victim of medical malpractice and say that those people are grifters simply for talking about it, I mean, what is a grift to you? So if you have a very base perspective of what trans is and what detransitioners are, then maybe you would assume there is a split between, it's probably male and female detransitioners showing up at the same rates. But when you see it's not, the fact that your low IQ reaction is to not question why that is in a way that doesn't already fit your narrative, that it's all political, it's just an attack against you, somehow has to do with something to do with you. Maybe the truth is something different, which is what I always say, which is that female detransitioners, their bodies are ravaged way more by the testosterone. They are way more affected. There are way more negative consequences for medicalizing female to male trans people than there is for male to female. So is there going to be a different regret rate when one, sex is receiving drastically different medical results and consequences? Maybe that's the more likely thing here. And then from there, the compassionate, route is to say, how do we fix this? But instead, you'd rather say they're grifters and they're on Fox News. Very insightful, very deep.
I know that I'm beautiful and kind and full of love. And the things that were said to me in the course of that relationship have burned me in such a way that it just feels impossible to be able to see a future where a man is ever going to see me as a woman. And it really hurts. The whole entire transition just hurts. The thought processes that were forced on me from other people hurts. Because now it is hard to view myself as a woman again. But I'm not trans. I transitioned. Now I look the way I do. Every single day somebody calls me a man. And I have to be like, I'm a woman, actually.
So I wanted to highlight this woman, very sad story, but because specifically she mentioned or alluded to that a toxic relationship contributed to her thinking that she was trans, trying to transition. And this is something that people do not talk about. When it comes to old literature, old psychiatric guidelines to do with transsexuals, which is the original term, a lot of people think this is all, 2010s and beyond. The trans medical industry as it exists now is over a century old. It's over 100 years old. So the guidelines that we have now are not the guidelines we've always had. And yet these problems are ones we're having now. So you have to wonder why. When it comes to old literature, there is a lot that psychiatrists at the time, John Hopkins, Stanford, and going back even older into other countries like Germany, the UK, they all saw a link for some people with gender dysphoria having to do with abuse and trauma, usually early in their childhood, but also you can go through trauma as an adult, which it sounds like this, woman did. And I'm not trying to diagnose her, but what I'm trying to say is one thing that I've gotten a lot of hate for speaking on is that there clearly is a link between trauma and trans, at least for some people. You can never speak for everybody, but we use our brains here. So when I say trans people often are victims of trauma, that doesn't mean every single one. Common sense. However, oftentimes when you want to find the truth about what's going on, when something is so crazy in the moment, like what is this explosion of people detransitioning, you have to go to the past. What was the past understanding of this? And there's a lot of literature about how people, when they go through a trauma, can develop gender identity issues because they feel unsafe. Their body registers their gender as being unsafe. If a little kid is harmed, let's say a little girl, hypothetically, not this woman, but a little girl is harmed as a child, the way her body may survive, the way her mind may survive, is that the body says, the problem is that it's a girl. Girls go through this. Girls are harmed and they start to feel like they'd be safer as a boy. And the same can go and vice versa if it happens to a little boy. So that is completely taboo to say now. That is completely considered disrespectful to, acknowledge. I don't think the truth is ever disrespectful to acknowledge. And also we can hold, nuance and a further truth in the other hand and say it doesn't mean it's everybody. But to deny the people that may be experiencing gender issues their own self-recognition and self-discovery that maybe it has something to do with unresolved trauma from their past, to deny them that simply so you can be politically correct is crazy.
Detransition is like leaving a cult. Trans is a cult. It requires groupthink and adherence to these insane beliefs that men can become women and women can become men. And it has the idea of a gendered soul. And it's just all very dogmatic. I used to argue with people on the internet that, oh no, trans has nothing to do with being like a religion, but it does. It's like a cult. And leaving it behind is essentially like leaving Scientology. You're going to get ran over, you're going to get canceled. I say this because there's no safety net in society for detransitioners. Your insurance will not cover any related reverse transition care. You're going to lose a bunch of friends and people around you that now think you're automatically a transphobe just because you are detransitioning. You are now stuck between two genders for some of us because some of us have so far medicalized.
Yes, it does place them in this gray area medical place where there's not even like a field for this yet. There's not even detransition specific professionals to understand what these patients might need going forward. A lot of them have to stay on hormones. So they can only really detransition sort of, mentally and spiritually. But I absolutely agree with what this person is saying. And I always look out for signs. Okay, I try to see, okay, there's so many detransitioners. I myself am a happy trans person. I know happy trans people. What is the difference between those people and people who end up having regrets? This is a red flag for me to mention that it's like leaving a cult, because yes, if you're doing it to be part of a group, this is a big red flag. And this is where a lot of people get caught up, especially online. So when I saw all these like trans Reddits and social media, where people were becoming part of groups and it became this political thing, it became this tribal thing, it was so strange to me because I came to this conclusion, alone. It was an individual move. It was a very individualistic mindset. And so the idea of doing it for social inclusion, whether consciously or non-consciously, because the thing that I sort of see is that a lot of these detrans people, when they got, caught up in transitioning and made the mistake, whether they knew it consciously or not, at least subconsciously, they were trying to gain access to a tribe, trying to feel part of something. And you never want to make a decision as big as your body, your fertility, your mental health, your physical health, your lifespan, everything. That decision should never be made factoring anybody else in at all. It's very scary, the idea to me, as a very highly individualistic person, to ever consider a decision as drastic and doing it for other people, right? But the scary thing is you can even do it subconsciously.
I lived as a trans woman from ages 19 to 26, and I recently detransitioned about 6 months ago. And I'm going to talk about why that happened and kind of what the f is wrong with me that I did that. So growing up, everyone always told me I was gay. The first time that happened, I was in first grade, and it got progressively worse my whole life. And then when I was in high school, this was around, so I graduated in 2016, to give you a kind of rough estimate of the time frame. At the same time that like Orange is the New Black was on, Laverne Cox was becoming popular, Caitlyn Jenner transitioned, like this was like considered kind of like there was a boom around trans awareness. It was not a secret to everyone around me that I was the squeaky wheel, like kind of in all situations. Like I was just a weird kid. I didn't fit in. It didn't make sense. I didn't make sense to everyone. So whenever people became more and more aware of transness, like people started to kind of suggest it to me, like, hey, like, do you think you might be trans? Or I had one friend in high school who was like, I know that you're going to transition. My aunt said that she thought that I was going to transition. It was weird. So it was like suggested to me a bunch of times. And then in like a moment of desperation, I was like getting out of a psych ward when I was 19. I thought maybe that like unfillable pit in my stomach is because I'm supposed to be a woman.
Today's mental health professionals will absolutely not question that. They will validate that. That's the culture around trans issues here. And then if you look up in Canada, it's against the law for a mental health therapist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, to question if their patient or their client is thinking that they're transition at all. It's considered conversion therapy legally, and you can lose your license in Canada. So that is how far we've fallen. First of all, just coming out of a psych ward, that is clearly indicative of other issues happening. And one thing about it, like I said, the trans medical industry is over 100 years old. If you look back in the past, where often the truth is, we're under this false illusion the truth is always in the future, or we have to find the truth. Sometimes we knew the truth and we forgot it. When it comes to trans healthcare in the past, we're talking early 1900s, late 1800s, it was very different. Old institutions back in the day all had studies and had published papers, which are all now taboo, about how trans is to be a very highly rare very selected group of people who have to meet an extreme kind of threshold to even go there. It was always seen as a last resort treatment for somebody who had persistent, insistent gender dysphoria, gender issues that went all the way through adulthood, that were present their entire lives all the way through adulthood. You had to literally live your adult life before making the decision. You could not be a teenager. And oftentimes it included private life investigations. They would look into your life and your work and your family and everything to make sure that you were not suffering from any sort of comorbidity. They often distinguished between fetishism, so that'd be cross-dressing, all the people you see out here now, people who are doing it because of unresolved trauma, because of sexual trauma, and they actually distinguished between people who were just homosexual, because oftentimes there's clearly this like spectrum of highly feminine gay men, just got a little bit of divine femininity in them, right? Who will, sometimes think that maybe they should be trans. And back in the day, they accounted for that. They were like, you're gay. Point is, they were very aware of other issues. And so they had detransition rates, from what I can see and from my research, as low as 0.3% back in the day, because it was extremely rare. It was all adults. They all knew what they were getting into. So now you look at, okay, so if trans is this concept that goes back at least a century in the medical context, but even further, clearly just in terms of human nature, feminine males, masculine females, etc. But all these problems are arising now, 2020 and beyond seemingly, then what's different? Well, all these things that are considered gatekeeping that I just mentioned that they always used to believe in are all completely gone. I'm never the person to sit here and ever be pro-transition, by the way. I'm an individual on this planet, living my individual life, and what's right for me is not necessarily right for anybody else. In fact, it's probably not. However, I will say that at least back then, the proof was in the pudding. The reason why you never heard of detransitioners or even really trans people, despite it being such an old concept, you never really heard about them prior to this large politicization, is partly because the people who were transitioning them at the time with all these guidelines, they weren't really missing the mark, I should say. They were transitioning people who benefited from it and then blended into society and lived normal lives. And so not only did you not hear about people detransitioning, you didn't even really hear about people transitioning because it was this very rare, very private thing that they accounted for all the pitfalls that could make it an issue.
Hey everyone, it's me, Maddie. I am a detransitioned woman, and today I was trying to think of another topic to talk about on here regarding my detransition. And the thing that came to mind is this. I have lost pretty much every single one of my friends from when I lived as transgender since I detransitioned. I have maybe one friend who's still consistently in my life, who I met when I was living as trans. And mind you, I lived as transgender for about 6 years of my life. I was on testosterone for 5. I got a double mastectomy, and I fully transformed myself to look like a man, which is pretty wild because I look like this now. I feel beautiful, and I'm happy to be here. But life has taken me for quite the ride. And I detransitioned, and at first I didn't even realize what was happening. And then I began to accept, oh yes, I am accepting that I am a woman, finally. And then I felt the call to speak out on my journey, and it was really that caused me to lose the last few of my friends that were still hanging on.
Isn't that so indicative of the cult aspect we were talking about before? Community is extremely important to human beings. It always will be, and that's why this is such a problem. How can we prevent this going forward? Are there people watching right now, for which I know there are, who are questioning, is it the right move? Is it not? I'm going to let you know right now, if it's because you're around trans friends, if it's because and really search yourself, like explore your own psyche. You have to question yourself, right? Am I doing this for the favor of a group of people or a political identity or to be included in something? And sometimes it's not always conscious. So that's why I say really question yourself. But it's just not, lost on me that almost all of them have this story about how it includes the social circle aspect. And then that social circle is dissolved because, go figure, it was based on something that was fake. It was based on you thinking these people saw the real you, but as soon as the real you became inconvenient to them, you were out. That's called a cult.
They told you what was going to happen before you started testosterone. So really it's your fault. You should have been paying more attention. See, but they didn't though. They told me the outwardly observable effect that I would immediately notice, like that my voice was going to drop, not that my vocal cords were going to dramatically thicken, and that a lot of women's larynxes aren't big enough to accommodate that thickness, meaning that my voice just always hurts. I snored last night, apparently, because my throat has hurt all day. It also means that I can't scream or raise my voice above a certain volume. They told me that I might experience vaginal dryness, not that the cells in my gynecological and urological anatomy are highly estrogen dependent, and that depleting them of that estrogen by going on testosterone is almost certainly going to cause them to irreversibly atrophy, to losing the ability to give vaginal birth, to urinary incontinence and pelvic floor dysfunction.
This is also why I often say, if you're out there and you're debating these issues and you're someone who's against children transitioning, which you should be, the only real argument you need to make, in my opinion, the most powerful one, is just the fertility argument. The idea that you take away a child's fertility when they are a child, there is zero wiggle room on that. And this is the argument that I've seen effectuate the actual most change in people, is them understanding that there actually is no wiggle room around the fertility argument. Yeah, there's no excuse or justification for getting rid of children's fertility and ability to have children while they are still children, that there simply is no argument why it should be happening to these people. And it's incredibly sad. When I talk about detransitioners, I do it because I know for a fact it literally saves people from going down the wrong road themselves. I get messages and emails all the time saying, thank you for just making it clear the differences between happy trans people and unhappy trans people, so I can decipher what it is my own psychology is doing and how my own brain is toying with this, and maybe it stops me from making certain decisions. I have countless emails and DMs like that. I meet people on the streets who say that. And so that's the importance of having a 360 conversation, not just one side where we're only supposed to talk about how transition saves your life and it's super great and nothing's bad, especially when there's an elephant in the room right now of a huge tidal wave of detransitioners, and they need to be addressed, they need to be accounted for, they need to be cared for. It's a problem and it's not going anywhere. Thanks again to Free Cash for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you guys check them out in the link below. Subscribe to this channel as well as my podcast channel. Follow me on X, Instagram, TikTok, all the things, and I'll see you next time.